Hi everybody. So in this assignment, what we're doing is we're putting together a collection of potential photographs that we're going to use to build our character in milestone 3. And we'll take a look at everybody's photographs and see how they'll work in the assignment, in the character, and see, if there's anything we can do to, you know, um, make suggestions for the photographs. And a few things I'll be looking for is just, will the photograph work in the character in terms of the quality of the photograph and the way it's been photographed, and we'll learn a lot about photographs from that process. The second thing I'll look for is, does every part of your character have a photograph? And then I'm going to use the assignment requirements of having 5 photographs as a minimum, and that's a minimum. So if you had more parts for your character, you may just naturally have more photographs. But if you have just 5 parts for your character, which is fine. Characters don't necessarily need to have more than that. But I will ask you to then, maybe find some duplicate photographs. For example, if you have a watermelon, for example, and you just have 5 photographs, maybe you could find another example of a watermelon. That's a potential idea, just so that we can really, it's always good to have a few done a little more than the requirements ask you to do when you can. And the other thing we're going to be looking at with the photographs is just to make sure that they're by good quality. Do they have a high enough resolution? And what that means is, are there enough pixels in the photograph that will make it clear and crisp? And we want to avoid photographs. When photographs are too small, they get a little blurry and kind of pixelated. And in Photoshop, Photoshop is a wonderful program, but what it cannot do is add more pixels to an image. Well, it can actually technically do that, but so look, if you look here, can you see how this is actually, I can already tell this is really good photograph because it's very clear and has like a lot of, very, very clear details. And something to keep in mind about working with photographs, this is the very first thing that I ever learned when working with a photograph, is that if you take a photograph yourself, you are the person who has like the best original copy of that photograph, because whatever comes into your camera, that's the best the photograph will ever be in terms of the number of pixels. Now, of course, you can adjust the color and, do all kinds of really wonderful things, which we'll learn about later on in this class, about how you can modify a photograph to make it look better, but you can never add in a better quality photograph in terms of the pixels, because what you get when you take that photograph is the maximum amount of pixels that you'll ever have. So if you find a photograph on the internet, what people sometimes do for when they place something on the internet is they will downsize it. That also looks pretty good. They'll downsize it, they'll reduce the amount of pixels in Photoshop or another program for the purposes of it being on the web. Maybe it's easier to upload or download or view a web page, or they don't want to share their original image. There are all kinds of reasons for that. So you have to be careful when you, and as designers, we often do find photographs in on websites to use, stock photo sites, and we have to be mindful about whether the number of pixels is going to work for the project that we are applying it to, because we can never add in more pixels. We can't like make something better than what we get when we receive it in terms of the pixel size. And the pixel size does govern how clear and crisp it is and how you can modify it. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say here. I think there was one other thing I wanted to say, which I think I've forgotten now. Let's see if I can remember. Well, it'll probably come back to me later on when I start the critique. But oh yeah, the thing that I want you to all keep in mind too is, especially if you're somebody who's worked in Illustrator before, Illustrator and Photoshop are very different with regards to this particular aspect of resizing images. In Photoshop, when we work with photographs, you cannot just sort of make an image bigger and have the quality remain. For the reason I just explained, is that we have pixels that come from a camera and we can't add into them to make the image better. Whereas in Illustrator, if you're used to working in Illustrator and you work on drawings or logos or whatever, you know that you can resize any image any size you want. Like you could make it a billboard size or the size to go on an airplane, because it's mathematically created. You know, you are creating the illustration directly in Illustrator mathematically with vectors. So that's the big difference here that you have to remember, is that Photoshop cannot do that, because you know, photographs are really more limited. They're almost like a painting, you could say, you know, where they are really more of a traditional media, where we can't, you know, they get translated digitally, but they really come from that same idea of building blocks, little tiny, these little pixel building blocks. Okay, all right, let's get started. Okay, Alma, now we've already looked at a few of your photographs, so let's just keep going here. Let's just zoom in here to your sketch that you've chosen. Yeah, I like this sketch. I thought that was a good choice. So you've got like a beach ball, shovel, shark head, toy crab arm and robot legs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 potential images, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, 5. I should say 5, because the robot legs are the same, and that's good. Okay, so this was your beach ball, which we looked at before. This is so this is definitely a high resolution image. Now, high resolution. Now that's a somewhat of a vague term. There are, you know, hold on just a minute here. I'm going to move this around a bit. So there are, you know, sort of, you could say, ways of discerning what is a high versus a low resolution photograph. Like in general, high resolution photographs are, you know, anywhere above 150 pixels per inch. But for the purposes of this class, I think that's not necessarily a very good way of figuring out what's a good quality image, because, you know, we're working digitally, and we're high resolution is usually something that we use for print. So I would just say that like find something that when you zoom in a little bit, like I'm doing here, this is actually pretty big on my screen. I can see that it's very clear, it's in focus, it has a lot of detail, you know. So if we zoom in here, even zooming further, so I can tell this is a really high resolution image. Again, high resolution, the way I use it, it just means that there's really a lot of pixels in it. And by a lot of pixels, like probably more than 800 pixels on the longest dimension. You know, if you took this into Photoshop and opened it, you could see that there was, you know, the number of pixels was maybe exceeding 800. I bet that this is more than that though. So, but the main thing is that you can work with it in your project, and the better your image is in terms of the way it was photographed, not only the pixels, but just, is it in focus? Is it clear? Does it have good color and lighting? That will make first of all, it's going to make your project look better. It'll just, you know, because the character is the sum of the parts, so the better your parts are, the better the character is going to look. It'll also make it a lot easier to work with it in Photoshop. You know, we've done a little selecting, both last week for sure in milestone 1, and we'll do a lot more selecting, you know, where we selected an object from the background. And a good quality image is much easier to select from the background than one that's not so good, just because, you know, the edges are a little cleaner, and you know, they have more pixels. This one, so this one is a little, you can see it's a little pixelated here. You can actually see it in the writing here, but it's not. If I zoom out a little bit, it is better. I would say it's usable. So this is the one that you would have to use right here, because it's the one on top, right? Because these ones are behind. So this is the one we can all cut out. But if I were you, what I would do is, I notice you only have 5 images here, so you could easily throw in a few more here of duplicates. So I might throw in a few more duplicates of this one, so that you may have some other options later on next week. So that one is, again, it's maybe a little small, maybe not the greatest quality in other ways. This one looks good. I think that's a good image. And these are the robot legs you're going to use, correct? Yeah, I think that they look pretty good. So yeah, they look good. Look, so I'm zooming in. They're really pretty clear and crisp. And what's nice too is it really helps when you have this kind of clean background behind it. You don't need to have it. This is very clean in the sense like it's almost like just a white space, with the gradation behind it. But so you don't necessarily have to. Your object can have things behind it, but it does help when things, especially when you have a more complicated object to select, that you have a simple background. So that looks good. And so for this one as well, let's take a look in here. There's something about this that doesn't look like a photograph. It almost looks like like somebody drew this. It doesn't have a lot of texture or details. So this is for your shark's head. Keep this one, but I would find a few more examples of a shark's head. Like I would just Google shark's head toy. Like there's this restaurant I go to that has all these little plastic sharks that they put on the tables for the kids to play with. And so I know that they're probably out there, like just, some kind of like plastic toy. You might want to try that. In addition, that like I think it sort of has a lack of sort of details. It also might be a little hard to select the head and put it on top just because it's so, I don't know, it seems to. Let's just look on Google and see if we can find anything. So as I mentioned in my notes, this is just a general comment to everybody. You can find your images anywhere you like for this class. I don't have any restrictions on where you find your images as long as they're good quality. In future classes, you may have instructors who want you to be a little more picky in terms of copyright, but I feel like this is a beginning class and it's just okay to find them anywhere. Let's just hop over to Google Images. So I just Googled toy shark. Sometimes you have to, play around with your keywords. Sometimes changing your keywords. So maybe this is not the right, maybe plastic shark. I don't know. You can sort of play around with that. Then I always go to tools, and you've probably seen this in the video I have on the announcements board. But I always like to just, you can go, bigger than 800 by 600 or 1024 by 768. So I just usually like to choose this to eliminate smaller images so I don't have to kind of spend any time on that. Something else you can do is go to type, and in here I like to go to photo so that I can get photos. Now this doesn't always, Google Images just sort of sorts according to their algorithm. So sometimes you will get line drawings and clip art in there, but this is also just another good start to to go through and see if you can find something. So yeah, there's some really interesting ones here. Yeah, I can see there's a lot of images here. So I think what again, some of these are definitely not photographs. Oh, there's some cool ones though, isn't there? So you kind of have to like see what, like you want your shark's head in a certain position, right? According to your drawing. Ooh, that's kind of like, would this one work? A shark hand puppet. Sometimes you can get great ideas too when you do sorts, because look, there's a lot of shark hand puppet images here. And the reason why I'm sort of intrigued by this is because look, it has kind of, it's a naturally cut off there, which might work for your particular character. Okay, so I think you're going to find that you're going to have a lot of choices here. So, okay, so here's what I'd like you to do for your assignment is I'd like you to feel free to keep this one if you like, but maybe find a few more images of the shark head since that's going to be so important for your character. And I'd also like you to find a few more images here of your shovel. Or your toy crab arm. Yeah. Okay. Okay, Aaron. Okay, so this is your character. It's made out of a lot of different pastries. Yeah, really. I'm glad I just had breakfast. Um, oh, hold on a second here. I rotated this to look at this. Now it's rotated. It always seems to do this. It rotates everything. Hold on here. Okay, all right. Yeah, so this looks good. Very nice. It's again, we can zoom in and really see that it, hangs together. And yeah, this one's okay too. It's a tiny, it looks like these guys are a little bit blurry, like maybe the camera focused a little bit more on this behind it. But I think, I think these are going to end up being quite small, so I think that'll be okay. You know, we just sort of do our best. Sometimes we don't need to worry too much. This looks good. So in this one too, so when you have things that are sort of stacked together or overlapping, then you always are going to be, needing to choose. I mean, this is probably common sense, but you're going to be need to choose the ones that are on top so you get the whole thing. So I would say these two would be the ones that you want to work with. This little edge looks like it's getting a little bit overlapped by the bowl, but I don't think too much. I think it will be unnoticeable if you select it. So I think this is definitely, I think, a good photograph. This one's good too. And again, here, you can really see how a camera will when you focus on a certain thing. Sometimes it depends on your depth of field, but sometimes everything will be in focus, and sometimes what is often more, I think, aesthetically pleasing, especially in advertising and like when you have images like this, is that you get some blurring in the background. And so in this one, you'd want to have this one, right? This is a great image. It's in focus. The whole thing can be selected as good color and detail. This looks good too. I think did you mention something about the croissant? I think you mentioned maybe something else that looks good. Oh, I think it was this one you mentioned. A PDF, I'm just going to say PDF is not my first choice for looking at images. This is something course development, asked, and that looks fine. It's interesting. When you zoom in, it looks good. But when when you're looking at it in comparison to the other images, it looks really small. And again, PDFs are not the most ideal in terms of, they're good because you can put together all of your images into one file. And it does retain the quality of your images pretty nicely, but it's hard to, like, if you all have your JPEGs that you use to create this PDF, and you can open the JPEG in Photoshop and really get a much quicker idea of the quality of the image than when we sort through the PDF. But there we go. It's just a kind of a compromise. Okay, this looks great. I don't see any changes you need to make here. Okay. Okay, Eric, so here's your sketch that you chose with the popsicle body, churro legs, brownie feet. Yeah, that looks really nice. Yeah, good. Cookie. Yeah, that looks really good. So I've been talking a little bit about what makes a good quality photograph. So in addition to having a good amount of pixels for your purpose, for whatever your purpose is, it can change depending upon, if you're doing a web site or something for print, it will vary. But in general, so you want to have the appropriate amount of pixels. If you have more, that's always fine. You can always get rid of pixels, but as I've mentioned before, you can't add them. But the other thing that I think makes a good photograph is good lighting and good detail. And what does good lighting mean? In general, it means that you can really see a lot of the form of an object. So even though this cookie is a very flat object naturally, doesn't have a lot of dimension, like three-dimensional qualities, this photograph managed to pick up what it does have. You can see that it's got sort of a darker edge here, so we can start seeing the kind of the thickness of it, and it has highlights here, so we start getting a sense of it. And in general, for the character project, having more dimension, like having good lighting that shows the form, is really it's a good thing to do, because it really brings your character to life. When would we have an object that looks flat because of lighting? That's something that it means usually that the lighting is very even across the object. And again, that's not happening here, but if it was, it would be very like flat looking because the lighting was very even. Like at midday, for example, if you go out in midday, oftentimes you get a sort of more sort of flat look, whereas in the morning and at night you get these longer shadows and things tend to have more dimension. Okay, that looks good too. Yeah, that looks nice. Yeah, that looks really good. Let's just zoom in here a little bit. Yeah, that looks really good. And good. Yeah, these all look really good. Yeah, great. Yeah, this one's nice too. Again, you've got some really good dimension in this photograph. A lot of lights and shadows. Same with this one. So great. These all look great. You don't need to make any changes to your assignment. Daphne, okay, here's your sketch with the hoses and the shovel feet. Okay, good. Okay, let's see. Here, let me just change my view here. So here you can see, I opened it pretty big, and you can see there's some pixelation happening here. This is just real standard pixelation where you start seeing the edge a little bit kind of blurry, and then also just these kind of like remnants. I think there's a name for them. I don't know what the name, I can't remember what the name is now, but where you get sort of like these sort of kind of hazy looking marks. But since this is so, I'm zooming it out to sort of where I think the size might be on your character. And when I zoom it out to that size, I see that it's probably going to work okay. As we zoom out, that's just what naturally happens. That when you zoom out like this, the pixels actually pack closer together instead of being spread out, and that actually improves the resolution. That actually makes the resolution higher because you're putting more pixels into a smaller space. So I think this will work. And this one. So in this one, let's go back here. Yeah, so you're going to kind of take a little sort of piece here to put it down here. Yeah, I think so. I think that will work. Yeah, see how it goes. I'm kind of thinking, will that work? Will that actually sort of look visually like a mouth and eyes when you put it all together? I think you're just going to have to experiment. I'm a little concerned that it's going to kind of maybe still look like a potted plant and not a character. But I think with some, experimentation, I think you can start making it look, more, like how this might look like hair instead of a potted plant. Something I'm thinking about is like maybe you could experiment with turning the pot upside down and having like the flowers come out of the bottom, like maybe a skirt potentially. I don't know. We'll see as it comes together. Oftentimes you really do need to, experiment to just see how it works. But I would just keep going with your idea, and then as it works, you just keep playing with it. That looks really good. This looks really good. And with this one, so let's go back to your arms here for a minute. So you want to kind of like create this sort of looser look to the arms. So something, I would try to get a few more examples here because I think this is going to be hard to select what you want. I might kind of continue to look for garden hoses. There's a lot of images like that on the web. So I would just kind of look for ones that maybe is a little more stretched out, because you can actually we're going to learn how to bend things in Photoshop later on, so you'll be able to bend something, but it's a lot harder to unbend something. It's also harder to kind of try to select a length of this tubing when it's overlapping all the other tubing. Okay, so I might just keep playing with that one. This one's pretty pixelated. Can you see that? How we can't really read the lettering on here? If I zoom out, it does get better, but it's still, I would replace this. There's going to be a lot of these on Google Images. Is it called a trowel? I'm sure there's other names for it too. I was just thinking in terms of a search word, a keyword. So keep finding something that's a little bit bigger. Use that method that I showed earlier about how to sort by size on Google Images, and you'll find something really good. And let's see, this one looks, yeah, this looks really good. This definitely, this flower you could use, this flower here. Something to keep in mind too, this flower might be able to be used, but yeah, you've got a lot of choices here. Something to keep in mind is that if you're creating sort of like hair out of like flowers and you want to use one particular flower, you can do that. You can just duplicate it in Photoshop by duplicating the layer and sort of get many versions of the same flower. Do you know what I mean? So you don't need to have one flower per piece. Okay, all right. Well, those are the changes I would make. Okay, Eli. Oh, okay, Adobe Stock. Yeah. To be honest, I don't really know a whole lot of what Adobe Stock has, so I think it's great that you use them so we can learn a little bit more about them. Let's see. Okay. All right, so here's your character, orange slice, peas. Oh yeah, that looks good. Yeah, that's beautiful. It's amazing. Isn't that like how beautiful that photograph is just in terms of the detail and color um, and texture? It looks good too. Oop. Let's see now, where are these going in your character? French fries. Okay, so for the leg, one of the legs. Now, if you listened in on the video last week, I talked a little bit about symmetry with the character in terms of that's some, and don't worry about changing it now, but next week, as you start working on it, you may find that your character comes to life more if you have symmetrical arms and symmetrical legs. Like, for example, if you used the crab arm for both sides or a pickle for both sides. Just because, again, we do expect living things to be even like, really complicated animals, which is sort of humans, animals, we sort of base it on, it's sort of based on the idea of symmetry. So it just will look more realistic or alive, you could say, if it has that. So just something to keep in mind. That looks really good. Yeah, that looks amazing. It's a really, again, really nicely taken photograph with so much, detail and again, that really will bring it to life. In this one, it's getting a little blurry here. It's very clear here, but it's a little blurry down here. See how that goes, I wouldn't change it now, but that's something that maybe when you put it into the character, it might be just fine, but you may find that the blurring, let's go back here. So yeah, see, it might actually be, that little blurred edge might be tucked behind this part of the character, so you may find it, not a problem. Okay, so yeah, I think everything looks good here. Okay, Jessica. Okay, yeah, let's take a look here. And you mentioned that you reduced the file. That's a great idea. Sometimes the PDF files can get really big. Yeah, this looks good. And it looks like based on your sketch that you have the eggs that are going to go over top this of the butter in the center. That's probably what you're thinking, right? Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Oh yeah, look, those look great. So detailed. Yeah, good. Great. That looks good. This looks good. Yeah, nice. And these all look really good. Great job. So, okay, yeah, I don't think you need to make any changes to this. I would say just sort of the same thing that I've been saying before, that you may find when you start putting your character together that you may want to um, have the same object for um, each side, two forks or two bananas for the legs, whatever you decide to do. If you need to. Sometimes students actually do work with the asymmetry, having different objects for arms and legs, and it works out really well. So, you just kind of got to play it by ear. Okay, Keith, let's see here. So you've got banana, chili pepper, some kind of gourd, and knife, and then looks like some type of arm here. Maybe this is a lobster arm, and then a jack-o'-lantern head. So let's just yeah, that looks really good. Yeah, that looks good too. Yeah, that looks really great. It looks like to me, like in this one, you would be probably, well, maybe selecting one of these two. So and this is a really nice image in terms of the color and the lighting and the resolution. One just FYI, when you go to select this, which we'll be doing next week, we're going to sort of, expand on our selection knowledge. You may find it may be a little hard to select right around this area or this area in here just because um, it merges with what's happening beside it, like the dark color sort of merges. So Photoshop has has a little bit of a hard time selecting in those particular situations. So you may need to find another image if you find that it's not selecting correctly. Like if we look at this one, it's another great image, but this one, it'll be really pretty easy to select all of this. Now underneath here, I think Photoshop is actually going to do fine down here too, even though it's lower contrast between the gourd and the bottom, underneath it, than here, but I think it'll still work. So just keep that in mind. So this image is a little bit blurry, so I might keep looking for another image that might replace this one. This looks really good. Now, you drew in here that you wanted to do, though, a jack-o'-lantern, with the face. You definitely don't need to do that. If you want to change your mind, just revise the sketch here, and just make it a pumpkin head. I think that could look really good. I don't know if it needs features like an eyes or a mouth, but if you do want to have this, then the features, I do think if you look in Google Images, you will find a lot of like carved pumpkins. So you could choose one that's already been carved. Um, I think that in Photoshop it would be really hard to try to carve it, realistically, because there's so much detail involved. So I'd probably try to, if that's what you want, I'd try to find one that already has a face that's been done. Um, but somebody doing that. I think Google Images you'll find a lot. So I would say that this is really the only image here that okay, this is the image I'd like you to change. I don't see a knife. Did I see a knife in here? I don't think so. So you need a knife, and if you decided that you don't want the knife anymore, just erase it out of there. Just, update your sketch, to any changes. But everything else looks like you've got it. Okay.